Ashley Judd's here. Let's do stuff.
Welcome to SinCast, presented by Cinemasins.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the SinCast. This is Chris Atkinson with Cinemasins, joined as always by the voice of Cinemasins, Jeremy Scott.
Hoi.
And from Music Video Sins, Barrett Share.
Hello.
And we're doing our continuing series of best movies of the years in which we were born, and we are now at 1984.
All right, this chick is toast.
These go to 11.
I'm a friend of Sarah Connor.
Here again was the very voice of God.
You fucking sneaky bastard.
Which is a really good year. Holy crap, 1984 is a good year. This is where you can see, like, if you were to make some sort of, I don't know, evolution chart for just me, it would be I would be the Homo erectus in 1984 because that's where I learned to like movies and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Homo erectus. And that's because of Police Academy.
That's right. Because of Police Academy. You are correct. But right off the bat, Amadeus won Best Picture of 1984, and this is the first Best Picture I think that actually deserves it.
Oh yeah.
Out of the whole group of the 80s that we've gone through, it seems like they just never got it right. But I think Amadeus is a really good choice, and I think it will be at least considered in the final there. But so many movies. Ghostbusters. Oh, Ghostbusters is so good. And also the Terminator. The first Terminator came out, which I would have to say you probably have a pretty good section of the population. I might be one of them who likes it better than the sequel.
Right.
And the sequel is really, I love the sequel. So, love the Terminator. What other movies do you guys want to talk about? There's millions.
Oh yeah. It's like, this is going to be hard. Beverly Hills Cop, Gremlins.
Yes.
I mean, so many iconic movies, probably iconic, not just to our generation, right? Now, we were the right age when some of these movies came out, but I think they're iconic to multiple generations, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Barrett, what about you?
Well, speaking of iconic, you don't get more iconic, and this is timely because of the new Andy Samberg pop star movie that came out. And he actually directly references this movie as an inspiration for it with Spinal Tap.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
I mean, that set the entire template for the mockumentary, the rock show parody, for just parodies in general. I mean, it hits all the notes. And strangely enough, like, the music is really, really good too, like on its own.
The music is good, and and there were actual hair metal bands who thought, but they thought it hit so close to home. Like everything that happens in the movie is something that has probably happened to an actual band in the past. They
lost in the bowels of the stadium to, like, his pod not opening, to, like, the set design, like having to use little people around the little Stonehenge.
That Stonehenge thing is so funny. Oh my God. Oh man. And this is Spinal Tap is another one that it's gonna just cloud this 1984 what's best of the year, because there's so many good ones.
There's so many rewatchable ones, right? You can watch This Is Spinal Tap or Ghostbusters or even like The Karate Kid or like Temple of Doom or Gremlins. You can watch these things over and over and over again. We did.
And of course, instrumental to my childhood, the Neverending Story came out in 1984, in which I saw it probably 50 times when I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
No lie. You talk about something that just gets your imagination going. It's just perfect. Like, I don't feel like most kids' movies do that nowadays. And maybe they didn't really even back in this time, but it's why this one has sort of endured for so long. But I love movies that just make you think about just the world in general. You don't have to think about just the movie, what they present. It just actually just gets you fired up and want to make your own sort of never-ending story or whatever, you know.
Right.
So it was just one of those movies that hold in such high regard and still today.
There are going to be so many, more than any other year we've talked about, there are going to be so many comments about movies we forget to mention from this year. Because there's got to be 50 that people hold dear. And like, okay, so let's move on to another one that we talked about recently on another podcast, Revenge of the Nerds. Which is not going to vie for best of the year, but was still huge cultural impact for a time and full of illegal activities.
Yes.
And then, of course, I think we'd be remiss not to mention Purple Rain as well. It's not going to win, but again, another iconic moment for an iconic guy that recently passed. And, I've probably seen Purple Rain more than I'd like to admit.
Can I say something about Purple Rain real quick?
Go ahead.
I like Purple Rain. I worshipped Purple Rain before it was cool to worship Purple Rain. And I swear to God, anybody will back me up on this. Before all the Prince love fest, of course, rightfully so after he died. But that movie is alternately indefensible acting-wise.
Yes.
But it is absolutely exemplary when it comes to musical performances. You have never seen better performances on stage, certainly filmed, than the ones that Prince did at First Avenue for Purple Rain. And that goes for obscure ones like Darling Nikki and The Beautiful Ones and Computer Blue to, the actual Purple Rain. And you got to watch the movie and sit through all the shitty acting to actually get like the real emotion behind that Purple Rain performance. And it's worth it. So that's
isn't that movie weird? Like there's so much good to it. And you get to the actual acting and all other stuff. It really is a movie that puts you in different places all the way throughout it. And it kind of reminds me, it's not nearly as bad as this, but the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It kind of reminds me of that. Rocky Horror Picture Show has great songs in it. It's a terrible movie. It's just ridiculously terrible. Purple Rain doesn't hit that, but it reminds me of that.
There's some times where it's close.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
My God, but it is absolutely worth it to get to the end and really all the way through it. The performance is just amazing.
All of that, and we haven't talked about 16 Candles yet, which is another one. We also did this as a movie recipe that's coming up. The thing about 16 Candles, and I said this, I think, in the recipe thing, is like, I feel like the 80s officially began with 16 Candles. Like, it's like the movies before it, you started sort of seeing signs of the 80s, the Reagan era 80s and everything. But 16 Candles is where it really, John Hughes that was his first directorial movie.
Yeah.
He comes in and then he comes off and rattles off a string of just incredible like teen comedies all the way. I mean, he had like nearly a perfect record going all the way up into the like 1990. But 16 Candles does not age well as far as racism, where Long Duck Dong is greeted with a gong symbol every time he comes on screen, to date rape, where the boyfriend offers his girlfriend Anthony Michael Hall and says, won't matter, she's drunk, she won't even know who it is, blah blah blah, and like saying that like as the romantic lead of the movie too. You could never get away with that today. No way, any chance. And Anthony Michael Hall actually feels like he's going to go through with it too. And they cut towards the end, and he's like, "Did we do it?" And she's like, "Yeah, we did." And so he actually went through with it.
Oh my God!
It's like, and like it just doesn't make any sense. But beside the racism and the date rape, there is some pretty funny moments in 16 Candles. And it brought us Molly Ringwald, and she became America's sweetheart and all that. So, but yeah, what a weird movie. That's one of those that puts you in a weird place now that you've gone through a whole bunch of stuff and you've opened your eyes and all that. I don't think the same things were brought up back then. Obviously, no, I don't. There was probably hardly anybody who brought up like, "Hey, you know what? That's kind of racist," or "Hey, that's kind of rapey." Nobody really said anything like that in 1984. But now it's just so stark and clear.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's again, the Revenge of the Nerds is the same year, so it's not a surprise. This is an era in which nobody gave a shit. It was also an interesting year, romantic comedy wise, because another two that I remember watching a ton are Romancing the Stone and Splash.
Oh yeah, yes,
and
yes.
Between those two and 16 Candles, you couldn't find three more diverse romantic comedy in any year. Maybe, I don't think they're so wildly different from each other.
Romancing the Stone it was an awesome experience because it came right around, you have Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom the same year.
Right.
It's obviously sort of taking that Indiana Jones, template, but putting a romantic comedy on top of it. And I used to watch this movie all the time.
Yeah,
It was just one of those. It was one of those, and I love Danny DeVito and how short he looked in that movie. Like you don't really get to see it that often. There's there's like so many moments where he's like walking, like they'll have a long shot of him like walking through that valley or whatever he's walking through, and he's like on, and he's like walking through, and it's like, man, he has never looked more short than in this movie.
I like that. That's what you remember from it.
I remember that's what I remember Danny DeVito looking like. I remember most of the movie, but Romancing the Stone was such a fun movie. And what was the other one that you mentioned? Splash.
Yeah,
I probably saw that another 60 to 70 times.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just one of those that was on all the time, and I always had to watch it. Of course, especially when I'm like 8 and I'm not sure. I'm not sure about if I like these girls or not, but I was sitting there watching that Daryl Hannah stuff real closely when she'd walk in, like walking towards the Statue of Liberty. And I'm like, hey, that's her butt right there. That's her butt.
That was Ron Howard, right?
Yeah.
So it was a pretty good year for like, I think I've said this before, maybe just a broken record, but it was a pretty good year for like, hey, I'm on the scene type director, or like with John Hughes and 16 Candles and Ron Howard and Splash. And then you had Blood Simple,
Yep,
the Coens, and I'll look through and see if I can find any more. But even just those three kind of, the Terminator was sort of James Cameron's, hey, I'm here, and everybody took notice after that. So
Rob Reiner.
And Rob Reiner, and Blood Simple is a movie that I love. I know that there are a lot of people out there who are like, what's the big deal with this movie or whatever. I love Blood Simple. I don't know what you guys think of it.
It's not one of my favorites of theirs.
Yeah. I mean, I love the plotting of it, and it's, they're obviously young, talented filmmakers just starting to learn what they're capable of and everything. Yeah. That shot across the bar is always one of those, that one take shot across the bar is always one of those great, things to look at in that movie. But I've always loved the plot, and Dan Hedaya being in, full Dan Hedaya mode. If you're a big fan of Dan Hedaya, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, love that movie. Also, and we may have briefly mentioned it, but The Natural is also another movie. Seriously, in 1984, I probably saw 6 or 7 of these movies more than 10 times at least.
Yeah.
And The Natural is one of the ones that I've probably seen up there with Back to the Future. Probably seen it the most of any of them. Love baseball, and it coincided with my love of baseball. Yeah. So love The Natural. What else, guys?
It's also a good movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Some of these we're talking about are not. But yeah. Have we even mentioned A Nightmare on Elm Street?
Nope.
Yeah, so
it's another big one.
That's how good a year this is, people. A Nightmare on Elm Street, some people would argue that as the best of the year, or at least for both. I guess it's quality, but cultural impact wise, like it, I think, defined the slasher more than the Friday the 13th series did.
Yeah, it was certainly one of the most popular horror movies of all time, and then it spawned, 7 or 8 sequels or whatever.
And a Simpsons parody.
Yeah, and a Simpsons parody. But you look back at that first Nightmare on Elm Street, and there's just so many things in it that it's so creative, and that's something that you can't say about a lot of horror movies. Just the idea that this demon can get you in your dreams is a freaking,
it's the concept that really freaks you out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of just really silly stuff, especially when you watch it now. But think about 1984 back then. It's that's a brand new thing. So, I've never been a huge fan of it, but I can see where it can be, where it would be that way. I wouldn't argue with you.
Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed about 1984, beyond it being just a general awesome year for movies, is it's a really good year for theme songs from those movies. If you think about like Ghostbusters had their theme, you had Beverly Hills Cop, you had Footloose,
oh man,
you had Against All Odds,
oh man,
you had the Spinal Tap stuff, you had Purple Rain, of course,
yep.
And, on and on and on. There's just the Neverending Story theme song, which I really love. For some reason.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, there was a lot of really great, like, pop music that came out of this this year. So, interesting to
Karate
to think
Kid's
about.
full of songs that were playing on the radio for a
well,
long time.
and the Karate Kid was John Avildsen, who did Rocky. And it's basically Rocky. I mean, the movie is Rocky again. That might be sacrilege to say to some people, but it is. It's the exact same story in many ways. Same like underdog story, same montages to set to songs. Same sort of like gotta win in the end somehow. Even though Rocky, didn't follow that same kind of thing, but it's really Rocky again. Also, two comedies that I hold dear came out in 1984. One is Top Secret, which was the Zucker brothers and Jim Abrams sort of coming back after Airplane, and they had done Police Squad, which would later be Naked Gun. But between that, and it only had like 6 episodes on TV, but Top Secret is one of those. If you've never seen Top Secret, I swear, if you love Airplane and Naked Gun, you will love Top Secret as well.
I concur.
It's so funny. It's and nobody and hardly anybody ever mentions it anymore. But there are some of the most clever gags that they've ever written is in Top Secret. And you just have to watch it to see. But I mean, I can't believe this never took off. And it might be just the fact that Val Kilmer is playing like an Elvis, like he's playing basically playing Elvis, I guess. I don't know. It's not really like an Elvis impersonator movie or anything, but it's just got some weird, it's got some weird things in it, but if you ignore that like couple of times that it goes off on that tangent, it's so funny. Another one that came out this year that hardly anybody likes, I guess. I don't know. Johnny Dangerously came out in 1984, and I love Johnny Dangerously. Amy Heckerling, this was her follow-up to Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Michael Keaton again. And I've always found that movie just hilarious. Especially when Joe Piscopo comes in and he pulls out this gun that's got this huge barrel on it, and they're like, "Wow, it's a big gun." And he goes, "Yeah, it shoots through schools." I just love that. But it's such a great comedy to me, and I don't know if it gets the love that it deserves, but
it's quick. It's really, really quick. And
yeah.
If you watch it multiple times, then you can really start to like parse out all the stuff that's in there. Mm-hmm. There's the really broad comedy. There's the villain talking about farging ice holes. And
yeah.
But then like those in between little things like that moment, like it shoots through schools.
This is my sister put me on a hook once, and he keeps doing that all the way through the movie.
Yeah. That's great.
But love that. There's there's so many. And we're probably not. I mean, we're talking about movies that probably won't win, but special to me also. Last Starfighter I used to watch all the time. Basically a movie that it's one of your. Because Star Wars existed, this movie exists. Somebody decided, let's make another type of, boy on Earth, and he becomes a hero and all sorts of stuff. Starman,
yeah,
John Carpenter.
Oh, I like that.
Starman is so good. It was actually, I think some of it was shot right here in Tennessee.
Oh, well.
Some of it, but used to watch Starman all the time. Jeff Bridges, fantastic. Love Karen Allen. Anything else? I've got a couple more, but I don't want to take up the whole thing.
We have a former mutual friend from our old theater days that would be mad if we didn't talk about Body Double.
Yeah, I was actually gonna talk about that if nobody brought it up.
Which is a movie I only saw because I was at work with him one night and he was talking about it and found out I had never seen it. And literally said, "You're coming to my house afterwards to watch this movie." And so I went over to his house afterwards and we watched the movie. And it's one of those things that, like, when you've never seen a movie, but you're watching it with somebody who adores it, you almost can't help but subconsciously go one way or the other really hard. Like, it makes you like it more or it makes you really hate it more. And it just added to my enjoyment to watch somebody who just adored this movie, and he was giggling at moments that didn't seem funny. And anyway, what do you guys think about that movie?
I love Body Double. I've seen it probably 5 or 6 times, actually. And there was a point where it actually came on quite a bit on one of the movie channels. It just seemed like it just always came on for whatever reason. But this is De Palma. This is a year after Scarface, and it feels like he's back in his zone with this one.
Mm-hmm.
This is pure De Palma, but this is a good, it's I guess you have thriller and you have some elements of comedy in it. Like, if you really wanted to take it as a satire on movies and actresses and actors and all that type of thing, if you want to really dive deep into it or whatever. But the main actor, Craig Wasson, reminds me of Bill Maher so much. He looks exactly like Bill Maher. And every time Body Double's on, I'm like, is that Bill Maher? Oh yeah, it's that other dude. But Body Double is one of those movies that has it has a really clever mystery to it. It's you can't really guess what's going on until the reveal at the end.
Yeah.
And I love Body Double.
Good. Awesome.
I'm actually okay. So I want to name 2 others. I don't think these have. I'm not going to talk in detail about them, but I'm actually surprised neither of you picked The Muppets Take Manhattan. But there's also another Woody Allen that's pretty good here. Broadway Danny Rose. I'll just mention that one. Is another fun movie from him. And then after that, you have that's, I don't know what else to really say. So I guess we can go to the voting on this now.
I have a prediction. Because you listen to that discussion, you look at the list of 1984 movies, and even I said this is going to be hard, and I think it is. But I think we're going to resolve this faster than anybody thinks we will. Like, I think we're going to all make similar choices here. I might be wrong, but that's my prediction.
Okay. All right. So, what's the order this year? While Barrett comes up with this order, but I'll just go ahead and throw out the movies that we didn't talk about. Once Upon a Time in America, which I don't think we saw. I think we've mentioned it before for other things, but that came out in 1984. Dune, David Lynch, Dune, which is, I remember watching this in a theater as a kid, and it frightened me beyond belief. And I didn't like it. Now, I think it's been it's one of those movies that got unnecessarily shit on over the years, and now it's sort of gotten sort of a comeback with people who really enjoy it. I don't think it's a great movie by any means, but Dune is worthy of mention. Footloose, which I haven't seen in forever, came out in 1984.
It was still plausible that towns would ban dancing, right?
Yeah. Back in the day, man. Hey, man. And then 5 years later, we got Dirty Dancing, where it was basically the same thing.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, which, is not a very good movie anyway. But
did they find him?
Well, there was a Star Trek 4 where he was in it, so I think he found it. I think they found him.
That's the one where he did the neck pinch on the guy with the boombox, right?
Yes.
So we know Spock is okay.
Well,
Yes.
Search for Spock is also the old switcheroo from Kirstie Alley to not Kirstie Alley.
Yeah.
And notable and watchable, in my opinion, for Christopher Lloyd's Klingon bad guy alone.
Oh, yeah.
Because he
Yeah.
chews it up. But anyway.
Nice. Okay, order is Chris, Barrett, and deciding vote is Jeremy.
Aha, fuckers.
I have a tremendous conflict with myself on what this number one movie is going to be. And, I don't know. How have we been doing this so far, really? Have we been picking our favorites, or have we been picking what we think is the best? Because I've been picking what is my favorite for the most part. What about you guys?
I think they bleed into each other. I think everybody understands that.
Yeah, it's basically what we consider the best of that year.
Right.
Yeah. So looking at this year, there's probably a million I've seen millions of times. But then there's one movie that I haven't seen a lot of, but I recognize is probably the best movie, and it's Amadeus. And Amadeus, when you look at Amadeus, it's like, oh, is this some boring period piece about Mozart? No, it really isn't. It's not
engaging.
that. Yeah, it's so engaging and funny in places you never thought it would be funny. And it's just, and it's a long movie, but it's so good, and I can't pick against it.
Wow.
I think it's better than anything on this list, and believe me, there's so many on here that I've seen hundreds of times and I love dearly. I think Amadeus is the best movie.
Wow. I did not expect that.
I did not expect that either.
My prediction is going to go wrong.
Well,
maybe.
You're absolutely right. It is unbelievable. I actually watched this again recently, and from the costuming, from the hyper stylistic to Tom Hulce's performance, which is amazing.
So great in that movie.
He makes Mozart relatable in a way that you just think of Mozart as this grand figure. And actually the poster of Amadeus is this, what ends up being his father and everything, this big, demonic looking thing. But it's funny and touching, and he's got this infectious laugh, and it makes it really fun. And F. Murray Abraham's performance as young Salieri and old Salieri is some of the most dramatic and realistic acting that I've seen in forever. He makes it very, very relatable, even though you can tell he's acting, Yeah. It takes a lot for me to pick against Amadeus because I think, yes, it is the best movie of 1984, but my favorite movie and what I think is the most long-lasting and most impactful is Ghostbusters. I don't think.
Yep. And believe me, that's sitting there swirling around my head. How do I pick against Ghostbusters?
It's 1 and 1A. I love Amadeus so much. I can watch the director's cut, which is 3 hours, but I could watch Ghostbusters, and I have watched Ghostbusters so many times, and there's so many great nuggets in there. You've got all of these actors, these comedic actors in their prime, and Annie Potts, and of course the Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, and Dan Aykroyd. Rick Moranis, like everybody's just really at the top of their game, and the effects hold up more or less. The humor certainly does.
Although it is weird. This doesn't detract at all for me, but the Ghostbusters is one of the first movies that I remember seeing. You have the computer effects and then the switcheroo to the puppets right after that. So that's like what happens with the dogs when they show up and everything. Like that, when the dog first shows up, it's like, back in 1984, you didn't really notice this, or at least when you're a kid, you didn't notice this, but it's so horrible the way that thing is rendered. And then especially when it crashes into the table and all that, but then it cuts over and it's like the puppet and it's like, oh, this looks real. This is good, but, but yeah, Ghostbusters is so good, and there's dialogue in it. Even that part where Bill Murray is like asking the librarian if she's menstruating and everything, that they think, that it's so well done that people thought that was an ad lib, and it's in the script.
Yeah.
That's how good that script is it feels like some things are ad libbed and it's not.
Well,
Anyway, it's endlessly rewatchable, and it's, I think, what I consider the best of that year.
I have no argument against it.
I also don't argue against that. In fact, I have this feeling that the majority of our listeners would expect us to crown that the champion. I have a unique relationship with Ghostbusters in that I was not allowed to watch it when all the rest of you were. It was one of those movies my parents were convinced was going to be full of inappropriate stuff for me at the time. And maybe it was. I don't quite remember the age. But, I was 9 when it came out. But we would be talking about home video a couple years later. But I didn't see it until maybe my mid to late teens. Long after everybody in my generation adored it and was in love with it. And I liked it. What's weird for me is I know it seems like most Ghostbusters fans hate the second one, or don't respect it as much. And I watched the two films and I like them both. They seem like the same kind of thing to me. And so I won't argue against Ghostbusters, but just because of the way I was introduced to it, and I guess not introduced to it, I can't vote for that one. And so I have to go with Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
Wow.
And another one I can't argue against. Because it's so good.
Yeah. And, we've talked about it a lot when we were just kind of discussing, and I don't have a lot to add to that, except that I just think it's brilliant, like ahead of its time, brilliant. And everybody, like you were saying with Ghostbusters, everybody in that movie is right on stride with their timing and their rapport with each other. And a lot of that movie is ad-libbed. And I think that's part of what makes it so good. But anyway, it had a huge cultural impact. It holds up super well. I can't find anything negative to say about it, and it's one of my favorite movies of this year, so I'm going with that one.
I love also, like, if you ever get a chance to listen to the commentary on This Is Spinal Tap, where they're all still the band as they're commenting, that's like watching the movie all like with new footage,
right?
And because I love the parts in the commentary where somebody keeps saying that guy's dead, and then somebody is like, well, no, he's not dead, he's still living, he's blah 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 blah, and like there's that scene where they go and visit Elvis's grave, and he's like, oh, Elvis, he's dead. He's like, oh yeah, he's dead. He was dead when we made this.
Oh my god.
And but yeah, I think this is the first time we've had a 1A, 1B, 1C where it's either one of these it could win, and I have no problem with it. In fact, my second choice, now that we're down to we haven't agreed on anything, is going to be that much harder, because now I got to pick either This Is Spinal Tap or Ghostbusters. And I'm going to go with This Is Spinal Tap as well, even though still Ghostbusters is, I'm not going to have a problem with Ghostbusters,
Well, I was going to go with a movie. It's not my turn, but I'm confused now because never mind. Boy, I just wasted some time.
Well, I think we're going on this by, however, which movie gets the most number ones and number twos combined. I hate to prolong this anymore, but like I have to do Amadeus as my number 2.
Mm-hmm.
So right now we've got Amadeus with 1-1 and 1-2. We've got Spinal Tap with 1-1 and 1-2, and we've got Ghostbusters with 1-1.
And because I didn't understand the rules, I was going to say Terminator, which would push us.
Yeah, you could throw in
you can put in another one. No, the rules are just you pick what you think is your second.
I'm sorry, guys, but that's how I have it on my list.
No, I agree. Terminator is fantastic.
Yeah, and the Terminator is just another one of those movies that you got to put up there. It's impossible to say, well, this can't be the best one, because it's clearly one of the better ones that came out in 1984.
You're going to have to science the shit out of this math, though.
yeah, we are. So because I loved all three of these choices, Ghostbusters is going to be my third choice.
So is somebody writing this down?
Uh-huh.
Okay, good.
So I'm also going to go with Spinal Tap as my third. So, and then what's your third, Jeremy?
Oh my God. It's Amadeus.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so that sounds like Amadeus and This Is Spinal Tap have 1, 2, and 3.
Correct.
Okay, so
I don't have a fourth one written down. I'm going to glance through here and choose.
well, and once you get down to my 4s, I'm going to start going like Neverending Story and
Me too.
you know all this stuff. So I think
Yeah, if we go between, let's just narrow it down to between Spinal Tap and Amadeus.
Yeah. Let's revote on those. Those are the only two choices.
All
okay.
right, so Chris,
Well, and I obviously, because mine was number 1, Amadeus will be number 1.
And mine.
I would vote for Amadeus as well.
Oh, you bastard! All right. Well, then I lose. Sorry, Spinal Tap. I tried.
Amadeus.
Yeah, I mean, this is, we picked what the Academy did for the first time since, since,
It's the 70s.
it was the 70s. We picked, what was the last
Annie
one?
Hall.
Annie Hall was the last one we picked.
Yeah.
We actually started off doing that. It was Rocky, then Annie Hall, and then we finally diverged from the Academy. But this time we're picking with the Academy.
We did.
Another great one from Milos Forman.
Yep.
Oh yeah. And we did. I mean, I think even though that's the one we chose, there were clearly several heavy hitting contenders that we all mentioned. So I mean, it's just that good of a year, and there are going to be a few more of these moving forward where it's just going to be really hard.
Yeah, especially when we get into the 90s, and there's a couple of like amazing years in that decade. And I think 87, I haven't looked at 87 yet, but I think 87 is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a hard one. But speaking of the future, we are going to be doing 1985 next year. I mean, next week, next year,
Next year.
next year, we're doing 1985. We're going to just take a
year.
we're going to take a break. But some notable movies to think about for 1985.
I'm looking at
Oh
them
my
right
God.
now.
Yeah, some notable movies to think about and ponder and maybe watch before the next podcast are The Breakfast Club,
Mm-hmm.
Back to the Future,
Goonies.
The Goonies, Weird Science,
Rocky
Color
IV.
Purple, Brazil, Clue, Teen Wolf, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, St. Elmo's Fire,
Out of Africa.
Witness, Out of Africa, which won Best Picture.
Yeah.
Rocky
Rocky IV, which did not win Best Picture.
No, it didn't, but it was Best Picture, right?
Yes.
In
our hearts.
It was in our hearts.
St.
It was
Elmo's
the best.
Fire?
Yep, St. Elmo's Fire. It was the best picture that Rocky IV was the best picture in defeating the Soviets. That's what it was.
Totally.
Ending the Cold War.
The Last Dragon, Cocoon, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, European Vacation. It starts getting a little bit dicey. Fletch.
A couple of fantasy notes, Legend and Lady Hawk.
Yes, yes. Yeah, those are both interesting movies.
Yes.
I don't want to get too much into our opinions of them, but because we will be doing that next week. But there's some movies for you guys to ponder for next week, and when we're discussing them, if you want to watch them and whatnot.
And tweet us your favorites, and
yes.
maybe we'll read some of them on the podcast.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
planning ahead.
Yeah.
All right, so today is exciting because we are going to be talking about movie theater stories again.
I want to tell you a story.
Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
And leave your bullshit attitude and baggage at the door, because we don't need it.
Yay.
It's been a few months, and it's actually one of our more popular podcasts. So we're gonna do volume 2 today. Barrett, did you want to start us off on one of these?
Yeah. So obviously I have the least experience with movie theaters, and I wanted to get more from Chris and Jeremy. I do have one more story about my brief tenure in a theater, and I wanted to get your thoughts on if this is a similar thing has ever happened to you. So I started working at a movie theater right after I graduated high school, like a week after or something like that. As you all know, if you're out of high school, that's kind of one of the most awkward times in your entire life where, your friends are going different places. You got the summer, but you don't really want to know, you don't know what to do during the summer because everybody's going to be going their separate ways and all that stuff. And they start real jobs and everything. So I started working with this, and the location of the theater that Chris and Jeremy and I worked at, is not too far away from my high school. So it got a lot of, my classmates' traffic. And I had the inauspicious job of a concessions worker. And that was almost the only thing that I did. And so I was way up front, when you first come in, you see my smiling face, ready to serve you some popcorn and a chewed up hot dog turd. And so unfortunately, if you work like the 7 p.m. shift and that kind of thing, you get all these people coming in, you get a lot of them that you know. And that's not a real good look. If you ever worked in fast food, or if you've ever waited tables or that kind of thing, and you're waiting on your friends, and it's kind of awkward.
It's the worst.
Yeah, right. And so, man, a couple weeks in, and I was starting to get my footing and everything. I was like, all right, well, I can, I'm getting used to this. And my ex-girlfriend comes in to the concession stand with her new boyfriend. I'm like, fuck. And so I got to wait on this bitch. And she ordered, and of course she comes into my line and she's like, oh, hi, and she's like, I want some popcorn and Billy Beefcake over here wants a fucking nachos or something.
Billy Beefcake.
And well, it was also 7:00 show. So there's just people everywhere. There's a million people working at the concessions and everybody's running around all crazy. And of course, I have to run down the line to grab the popcorn and everything. And you guys know what I'm talking about. Behind the counter, there's this thin veneer of popcorn, whatever that shit is that they put on popcorn.
It's buttery topping.
There's this thin veneer of this oil that's just on the floor, and everybody's just rolling around on skates, basically.
Yep.
And man, as soon as I got back, I was going to get rid of this woman and just go about the rest of my day. I slipped on that oil and went ass over tit, and just the popcorn flew up, went everywhere, went all over her, went all over him. I took down the nachos, and it was a fucking disaster. I'm on my back and I'm looking up, and this woman's just laughing at me. I'm like, fuck you. Yeah. So anyway, all that to say, to start off, did you guys ever have a moment within the scope of your theater career where you had a real embarrassing moment, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Oh, geez. I'm not prepared to tell too many of those stories, but yeah. So
mine is almost like yours. I went in to a sold out auditorium, and I can't remember. I think I may have just gone down there to do something with a thermostat or something like that. Because we had cleaned the theater and all that, and I'm pretty sure I was usher age back when this happened. And so I walked in and I did the thermostat, and I decided to walk in front and around to, I guess there was another thermostat, or I had to walk to the other side for whatever reason. And the front of the theater is nothing but just a slick concrete floor, basically. It's even when there's not several shows of people dumping their popcorn on the floor and all this other type of stuff, it's already a slick surface
and other fluids.
And other fluids, indeed. Don't kid yourselves. But I walked, and this is, there's 200 people in this auditorium. I'm walking in front of in front of this auditorium, and just, my foot just slipped on something, and I went straight down and everything, and just crumbled. And there were people were laughing and, whatever and all that. I got up and took a bow. And walked out.
What else can you do?
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things. It's like, yep, this is embarrassing, but I'm going to own it.
I'll counter your embarrassing stories with a story about when I was smooth. Because working at the theater you're talking about was fun because once a month or so, somebody famous would come in, right? Because it was the biggest theater in town. So you might see Eddie George, or when they were filming Green Mile, Tom Hanks came in. But one night, it was the last set of shows. The lobby's pretty much empty. And I just started all my projectors. And so I came out behind the concession stand and started filling up my drink at one of the unused stands. And there were two customers standing right there in front of that drink station, being helped by a concessionaire on a register right there. So I'm 3 feet away from them, but I'm just filling up my Mountain Dew. And as I look up and I realize it's actually Judd. and her race car husband. And she didn't marry
Dario Franchitti.
And she gives me, I'll never forget this moment. She gives me this smile like that's super polite and warm, but also suggests, hey, can you not make a big deal out of this right now? And I just kind of smiled back, looked back to my drink, and turned and walked back upstairs. And it was the coolest thing to know. I think they were watching Gladiator. Anyway,
it's the funny thing about Nashville and everything if you worked in movie theaters in the 90s and the early 2000s and everything. I think everybody has an Ashley Judd story.
Probably.
like I worked at a theater in Franklin and the Judds, if you aren't familiar, the country duo from the 80s that were such a huge hit and everything. They lived in Leaper's Fork, and they used to come to Franklin, which is the theater that I used to live in. I mean, yeah, I did live there too. But the theater that I used to work at and everything. So they were huge. And then Ashley Judd started becoming a big deal in the mid 90s and everything. And I remember once I was an assistant manager, and I was just sort of hanging out and talking to one of the ticket takers, and this ticket taker, this girl's like, that girl over there looks really pretty. And I looked over, and it's Ashley Judd, looking just dynamite, in a pink dress and everything. And I was like, that's Ashley Judd. No wonder she looks great. But that was the day that they went to see Air Force One, and we had just gotten a Kiss the Girls poster in, and I got her to sign it, and I got a picture with her and all other type of stuff. But she came in several times for various reasons, but it was always it was always a cool thing, when Ashley Judd's here, let's do stuff, that type of thing.
Hey, it's Bart, and he's doing
let's have a celebration. Let's have a celebration. Ashley Judd. Let's order a pizza.
The Ashley Judd banner.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so yeah, we would do stuff.
I'm going to move into one of the stories I planned to tell today, since we've already gone for several minutes off the cuff. And I want to assure everybody, this is volume 2 of Theater Stories, but I'm sure there's enough content for at least 6 or 7 volumes. So if you like these, they'll be around for a while. And last episode that we talked about Theater Stories, Chris referenced Jeremy has a super racist story. And that's all anyone wanted to hear about for the next several weeks. So I'm going to tell that story right now. And I'll tell you up front, it is one of the most racist things I have ever witnessed in my life. And I'm going to not use names or change them to protect the guilty. We had this guy at a theater Chris and I both worked at that was sort of the fix-it guy, the handyman guy. Let's call him Bob. And Bob was not a high-quality employee. He was the kind of guy who would probably come in stoned or drunk every other night. He would come in as we were closing, fix stuff that needed fixing till we opened again in the morning, and then he would go home. And pretty sure he was off the books, pretty sure he was paid cash or movie tickets by the boss. And she was able to somewhat kind of control him. They had a weird relationship, but he never did anything I asked him to do. And he always seemed kind of lazy to me. But he was nice. He was pleasant. He wasn't rude. And it's important to note for the future of this story that he was African American. So from time to time, I don't know how much this happens anymore, but we used to get lots of promotional items for movies at the theater, like trinkets and doodads that usually we just kept as employees rather than giving them out. Like for Nurse Betty, we had ink pens that had red ink, but they looked like a syringe. And I still have Xavier's School for the Gifted and Talented from the first X-Men movie, a T-shirt that says that. So the little trinkets and gizmos, but the weirdest one we ever got was this giant bag of colored condoms for the movie Road Trip.
Yep.
And we're like, we can't give these out at the screening. We can't give the condoms out to customers, right? So they just sat in the office for the longest time. I know for a fact at least 2 employees used them to sex other employees. But there generally was just this bag of condoms in the office. And one day when the boss lady was going through cleaning, there were 5 people in there. Me, one other assistant manager, basically a secretary, and then the boss, and then Bob, the fix-it guy. She pulls this bag out of the drawer and looks in it, wads up the top and throws it at Bob and says, "Here, pass these out among the black community so we won't have so many children without fathers running around."
What? It's just so ridiculous.
And he kind of awkwardly and walks out the door because he was in the doorway. And I have never in my entire life, you could script that in a movie and I would not believe that somebody was actually that racist or clueless.
Wow. Yeah, it's that. I mean, it's more than just calling somebody a name, right?
Yes.
It's there's types of racism that we sort of look at and it's like, yeah, that's pretty racist or whatever, and then we move along. But that right there is probably the upper echelon of anything that I've ever heard.
It's gotta be, right?
Yeah.
So I ended up reporting the incident, and nothing ever happened. The dude came out from the home office and interviewed a bunch of people for a few days. Then he left, and I never heard another thing about it. But I did what I felt was right. I don't really feel like you should talk to employees like that.
Did you get any backlash from her?
No, but this is the kind of boss that, you know, she was always giving backlash to everybody for various reasons. Nobody really liked her very much, I'm sorry to say, except
her family.
I can
imagine.
Yeah.
So
it seemed like they always did that with that theater too. Like they would just keep ushering in people who were just miserable bastards.
You have to be to run that place, man.
Yeah.
It's such a huge building. We're talking about it's got 27 auditoriums. At the time we were working there were 4 separate concession stands. I mean, it's just a beast. I think you run that for a couple of weeks and you can go from good person to dick.
Well, and Barrett, the story that you just related, you were probably working at the time that was at the height of Hollywood 27's, like big, huge, you know. Mm-hmm. It floored me when I first got there, how busy that theater was. I mean, and we had so many employees, so it didn't like ever feel overwhelming, but that, you know, we used to sell out of everything. Yeah. It didn't matter what stupid movie came out. They would sell it out. And there was just so many people running through there. Once they started building other theaters, like in other parts of town and everything, it really started dying out. But
I'll never forget, like I had worked at a 3-plex and a 5-plex, and then I came to work here and it just blew my damn mind that there were 2 full-time managers scheduled to count money on.
Yeah. Just to count money.
And, I mean, blew my mind.
Yeah. Okay. So, here's something that happened while I was in New York. There was a point in time where I was supposed to just go around training people for the projection booth, because in New York, they still had union projectionists, which is something that I didn't really deal with. Although at Hollywood 27, there was that brief period of time where we had quote unquote union projectionists, even though they weren't, I mean, it was never really official or whatever. I guess. Do you remember it being official,
Yeah,
Jeremy?
I think it was, but it was over pretty quick. They were phasing them out.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't, you know, they didn't get the same kind of benefits that I'd say a New York City person got or whatever.
You're probably right.
But like, so they had union people in New York, but there was a sort of a scare that, if the unions were to get, broken up out there, that there would be a whole bunch of untrained managers that basically would have to start running projectors and everything. So for months and months and months, I was going to all these theaters in New York, Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, all these different theaters, training managers training the managers to do a job that probably they would never have to do. I mean, it was that type of thing. So like a lot of times people wouldn't show up and people wouldn't respond and all that, but I was the guy to do that type of stuff. And I was actually going through all that, you know, certification stuff for them and everything. But and this is not even, I'm giving you some background, but this is not even the crux of the story. I got done with that one day. I was at a theater in Brooklyn, training 2 people in their certification program. And I was like, you know what? I'd like to go see a movie. But I'm going to see if I can get into a theater wearing just my Regal outfit and not have to deal with tickets or anything like that. Cause I was at a sort of a point where, I couldn't call my manager because my manager, we didn't open up like in the, afternoon at my home theater. We didn't open up early, and I don't think I had his number or something prevented me from calling him. But I think eventually I just decided, you know what? I don't want to call my manager. I don't want to call this theater. I just want to see if I can do it. So I went to this theater in Manhattan, the Union Square Theater, the 14 screen, and walked in with my Regal like maroon thing on with black pants. And I walked to there's an escalator that goes up to where the auditoriums are. And there's an usher there, and he saw me and he's like, "Excuse me, sir." And I was like, "Hey man, I just got hired. I worked here." And I just went up the escalator. The guy was just kind of didn't have much to say about it or whatever. I just kind of walked right on past him and everything. So, but the problem is the movie I wanted to watch, which I believe totally wasn't worth all the trouble, but I just wanted to see it. I think it was something called Wrist Cutters. I think Patrick Fugit's in it or whatever.
I've seen that. Uh-huh.
And so my instant problem is that I am wearing a Regal outfit and I don't know where this movie is. So I'm like walking around in this thing looking for this theater. And this theater's like the theater with that movie in it is tucked behind one of the concession stands. I couldn't find it anywhere. Finally, I found it. And so I was like, I just kind of looked around, and I know that the people in concession saw me. All these people saw me. And I walked into the theater and I found a seat. Now, if I had been smart about this, I would have brought a change of clothes and I would have gone into the bathroom and changed my Regal outfit out and just gotten into some normal clothes. And then nobody would have ever known that it was me or whatever. But I wasn't smart about this. So I walked into the auditorium and found a seat. And here also, unbeknownst to me, I did not know of this policy that Regal had. And I worked for the company for a good, 11, 12 years by that point. It's against Regal policy to watch a movie with your outfit on. You're supposed to have like, if you go in to watch a movie, you're supposed to be like in a t-shirt and all this other type of stuff. I had no idea because I'm sort of like a grandfathered figure, like I work upstairs in the booth, didn't have to deal with that break rules and all these other type of things that, basic employees always get and everything. So I sat there and I thought I pretty much got away with it. During the preview, somebody from the theater walks in and they come up to me and they say, "Hey, do you work here?" And I was like, "No, I'm a booth certifier. I just came from another theater and I walked in or whatever." And that person, I ended up talking to her for a while. I ended up saying, and she goes, "Oh, it's not that serious, blah, blah, blah." I was like, "Okay, well, all right. No problem then." So she walked out after I explained who I was and all this other stuff and everything. And I was like, okay, now I'm officially in the clear. And then a manager walked in right after that with like ushers. Like it was like fucking Game of Thrones or some shit. Like they might as well have been Bannerman with fucking spears and shit like that. And she was not as happy.
Oh.
She was like, "Are you coming in here saying that you work here and trying to watch a movie and all this?" And I was like, yeah. So I walked. So I was like, "Look, I just didn't want to cause a scene." So I walked out with her and everything, and she started just laying it out for me, like blah blah blah, and And she's like, yeah, you can't do that, blah, blah, blah. And telling me what I can't do. And I was like, yeah, I know. And I said, and, you know, and when you're caught in a situation like this, it's like you start coming up with every goddamn excuse that you can come up with. And you know that they're wrong and everything. You're like, yeah, you know, I woke up early this morning and I'm tired and I didn't remember the policy and I didn't call ahead and all that. And I'm sorry and all that. I guess in the end, all I can say is I ended up getting kicked out of a theater that from the company that I worked for. I got kicked out of one of those theaters, and it was just one of those embarrassing. You know, you want to talk about embarrassing? That is one of the most embarrassing moments ever. And like, you know, walk
of shame out of your home.
Yeah, and I felt bad. I felt really bad for that usher guy that half-heartedly tried to get me to come back and everything, because I know he got lots of grief afterwards, and I hope he didn't get fired or anything. And
you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the ticket taker in South Park Bigger, Larger, Uncut, where they keep going in to see the movie.
Yeah.
And as they're walking out, he's like, hey.
Yeah, hey.
Movie has very naughty language.
Yeah. But yeah, like, and nothing, and much like a lot of things, like, even, you know, in the last one I told the story about calling that guy a motherfucker while I was in the projection booth and everything. You know, I was like, oh, what's going to happen? You know, I was like, what's going to happen? And nothing happened. Like the manager, I think that manager from the theater called my manager, and my manager was like, well, yeah, he knows he's not supposed to do that. I don't know what else I'm going to tell him.
Well, I guess we can summarize is that you can illegally go see movies. You can make horribly racist comments. You can openly insult employees, and nothing will ever happen to you, right?
That is correct. That, I mean, at least in my charmed life, Joel, I think a lot of other people got, you know, harsher sentences.
Yeah, let me tell you. This is, again, it's not on my list of stories, but now you've prompted me. For a time, I was a GM of a 10 screen, and I went in one Friday at like 10 a.m. I worked all the way up until like 9. I worked like 11-hour day. Started all the last shows and left my assistant manager in charge and went home. And I guess technically, you know, my district manager expected me to be there all the way to close that night, but I had come in super early. So about an hour after I left, I get a phone call from the district manager, and he's like, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm at home." He's like, "Why aren't you at the theater?" And I was like, "I was there for 11 hours, dude. I'm tired. An assistant manager can handle it." And he was like, "Obviously not, because I just got a call on my cell phone from an angry customer. He gave out my cell phone number." What? I was like, "Okay, well, that sucks." And he was like, "What step is he on?" Of course, when you get written up, you get stepped, right? Step 1 is written or oral. Step 2 is a written warning. You get so many steps, you get fired. But they don't fire you. What they do is suspend you. And then HR determines for a month and a half whether they'll get sued if they fire you. And so he's like, "You get him to the 3rd step. I don't care what you have to do. Tomorrow, you suspend him, take his keys." And I was like, well, that doesn't seem very right, but okay. And so I went in the next day. You know, I was able to write him up for giving out the district manager's cell phone number and one other thing that it was technically wrong, but I would never have cared about. Told him I was sorry, took his keys, and he left. 2 weeks later, HR decides, no, this is not enough reason to fire him, and I got written up for falsely 3rd stepping him.
Oh, come on.
What?
So I got...
Yeah, it's so ridiculous.
So there are plenty of people who got screwed by the disciplinary system of Regal Cinemas, and I was on the receiving end. It's
funny. I never got written up until like one of my last years working at the movie theater. And this is a 20-year career, never got written up for anything. And then the thing that I got written up for, which I may say for another story, it's not an interesting story by any means, but I got the 2nd step on for some total bullshit that wasn't my fault. Like, it wasn't anything that I did at all. It was just because I was in the vicinity of the thing that happened. Yeah. And I was like, this is bullshit. I didn't care. This is the first time I'd ever gotten rid of it in my life. So I'd lived a charmed life to that point. But I'm like, oh, you're going to write me up for this after all that? You know, whatever.
Let me tell you some real bad shit.
Exactly.
You don't even know.
Yeah, correct.
Well,
all right.
Is it my turn?
It is.
I mean, I know I just told one, but it was a cheat story. So I want to talk about the time that I had to give a deposition in a lawsuit.
Yeah.
There was the same 10 screen I was just talking about. We were having the carpets changed overnight. So like we would close and some crew would come in it was going on for like a week, and they would tear up some section of carpet and put down new carpet, and we would open the next day and go on. Well, this is a classic sloped floor auditorium theater. We didn't have stadium seating. And at the very back, the rows were kind of curved, and the back row was far enough away from the back wall that if you shimmied, you could kind of get from one side to the other by going behind that last row. But on the ends, it was wider, and I used to check auditoriums by walking in, sliding over to the right, and standing behind that last row and just kind of monitoring. Well, apparently a woman tried to cross the auditorium by going behind that last row of seats. Never mind that she was 3 times my size, and I had to shimmy to get through. But I learned of this when she and her movie mate came out, and I had to write up an incident report, and, yada, yada, send it to the home office, and that was that. And like, I don't know, 6 months later, I resigned, went to a different job. 2 years later, I went to work for Kroger. Somewhere around in there, I had to go give a deposition about a lawsuit related to this woman's accident.
What?
Oh, God.
She had tried to go behind those seats, but the carpet crew had put a roll of carpet back there to store it for the night, rather than taking it back out to the truck or upstairs or whatever. I didn't know this. None of us knew this. And she tripped on that carpet and hurt her wrist and broke a piece of jewelry. I don't know. I don't remember the details. But this is at a point in my life where I have no love for Regal Cinemas whatsoever. Like, why are you calling me, right? I have resigned 3 times from your company. Twice I came back. This time I'm not. Do you really want me as a witness? But because I was the GM and I had taken the incident report, I had to be deposed. So went downtown, met with the lawyer guy and these 2 other managers that used to work with me that were also getting deposed. And then when it was my time, I was led into the conference room. And it's basically like that scene in The Rainmaker when Matt Damon is there for a deposition and across from him are like 5 of the highest priced lawyers in the world. Or I don't know. She was suing Regal. She was suing the carpet company. I think there was a 3rd entity she was suing. So there were lawyers all around this other side, but there was only one guy asking questions, and then Regal's lawyer was to my left. This should have gone very badly for Regal. But it did not. Because the woman's lawyer is one of those guys that just assumes he's smarter than you before you open your mouth. And it became very clear within 5 or 6 questions that he was trying to get me to say certain phrases. Mm-hmm. If you know anything about my personality, you should know that's not going to go over very well at all. Don't put words in my mouth. And the big sticking point was he wanted me to say it was reasonable to assume that if she had seen employees go behind the seats, that she too could go behind the seats. But the phrase was reasonable to assume. And I would later learn that's a key phrase in lawsuits like this. And had I said it, it would have been bad for Regal. But I, at this point, am stubbornly not going to say that shit because you're trying to make me. And so he asked me again, isn't it reasonable to assume? And I said, no, they've seen me all kinds of places that they're not allowed to go, like on the roof, behind the concession stand, in the manager's office, in the projection booth. Just because they see me there doesn't mean it's reasonable to assume they might wander in there. That's not going to work. And 2 questions later, he was done with me. Afterwards, the Regal lawyer took me out to lunch. I swear to God, he was giggling the entire time. And he told me, you should have been a lawyer.
Yeah.
I was like, well, if he pissed me off, if he hadn't pissed me off, I might have accidentally said what he wanted me to say. And of course, I never heard another thing about it. So it was either dropped or settled out of court or what have you. But
I'm actually surprised that during that sort of line of inquiry, they didn't just object and say it's asked and answered, because that's what usually happens when they do that. Repeat.
What's funny is the Regal lawyer didn't say a word like the entire time. He just sat next to me and had told me, if there's anything out of line, I'll step in, but he never did. So you're right. I don't know how that works exactly, but he had 2 or 3 good runs at me to try and get me to say that phrase.
That's awesome.
Okay. So now I have a million others, but I have a friend from New York who actually sent me a story, a story from her perspective.
Oh.
And I'm just gonna go ahead and tell that one, unless people think that that's cheating in any way.
It's our podcast.
Yeah, but and I have plenty more. So yeah, just like Jeremy said, it could go many volumes after this. But I found this story, so good that I was like, yeah, I definitely have to do this on the next podcast. But I don't think I was working at this particular theater anymore at the time that this happened, but it was working at a theater it did happen at a theater where I had worked before. But this girl, Christine, was working up in the projection booth, and our manager, was Joanna. And so there was how your everyday communication happens over the radio. At the theater. So a lot of things are pretty easy. They said, we need a manager to the box office, or, hey, there's something wrong in number 5, go check it out, blah, 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 blah. So you just imagine if you're up in the projection booth and someone, a ticket taker, just says, can I get a manager to the lobby? There's a kid inside the claw machine.
Oh.
Wow. And apparently, I can only imagine what this would be like if you heard this over the radio, because you'd be probably like you guys are right now, huh? What? Yeah, especially when you hear that over a radio, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't communicate you heard it, but it doesn't communicate the problem at all. It's not sufficient. Even though it's basically there. But apparently there was a comedic 3 seconds of radio silence. And then she said, what? So they repeated it. So she and Joanna, go running down to wherever this claw machine is, probably the lobby. And then, yeah, sure enough, there's this small kid, this little girl, inside the claw machine.
Good grief.
And if you guys don't know what we're talking about, like Toy Story, where they're getting the prizes out and everything, we're being sent to a better place, all that type of stuff. It's a prize machine that nobody's ever won in the history of arcade machines. But this little girl standing in the little place where you get the prizes. Like the little door that only, like how vending machines are, where that door goes up, and so that you can't, Homer Simpson your arm all the way through and try to grab a prize, by itself, and without putting money in the machine and everything. She's standing in that tray, but her body, you can see her in there, inside where all these plush animals are and everything. And it's cute little girl with curly pigtails. You couldn't push the door in because her feet were there, her legs were there.
Right.
You couldn't open it up or whatever. And apparently, how kids are. The kid wasn't all that upset at all, but the mom was super upset. So then the kid got super upset and everything. So, that's the way it is. But so the funny part about this thing she relates is she wishes she had that 911 call recorded, because she called 911 and the way she writes it out, she's like, 911, what's your emergency? There's a child stuck in the claw game. What? There's a little kid stuck in the claw machine. Someone has their arm stuck in a machine? No, the whole kid's in there. So she finishes the call and she runs back, and before FDNY can show up, they'd already gotten her out. They actually got her to where she climbed back into the machine fully so that they could push the door all the way and then slide her back out the way she came, basically. Jesus. That's how they did that. But the manager Joanna was sitting there with a fire extinguisher, basically in mom mode, ready to smash the thing open. And then FDNY shows up, and of course, the kid's okay, there's nothing wrong, all this other stuff. They probably just prank call or whatever, and yeah, sure, there was a kid inside the freaking claw game. Whatever you say, dumb girls, and walked off.
Unbelievable. How did she fit through that? I mean, that's not a big shoot, right?
No.
Jesus.
Man.
Like, yeah, how in the world? Like, I mean,
She's
basically,
like the T-1000, right? Like she can liquefy
yeah,
herself
man.
and just like
It has to be like that. It's like you know, she got in there and she was like, get out, you know. It's like it's a crazy thing. Like, I don't think anybody knows because nobody's ever seen how. Like, unless there might have been security camera footage somewhere, but who knows if the camera was pointing in the right way or whatever. But like, yeah, that's insane. Like, how did they do it? And how did they do it? This is one of those stories where you're like, you know, how did the kid get into the gorilla cage? And how did the kid do this? I mean, this feels like something that takes even more time to try to actually get yourself into, you know, before your mom notices or whatever.
Hey, what
like,
I would have done if I worked there is I would have gone right to the tapes and watched, you know, just for entertainment value, and watch what she did to get in there.
Well, and who knows? I mean, you know, it may not have been pointed right at that claw machine or whatever, but I would have gone straight to it just to see if there was even a possibility of that happening. And who knows, they may have.
Yeah, that little fucking kid was trying to steal an animal is what we can take away.
Oh yeah.
She was trying
terrible.
to steal toys.
Kids are just awful.
Yeah,
they are. When kids want something, that's just generally a terrible.
He should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Yeah, absolutely. 30 years, no toys.
Oh man. Well, speaking of greedy people, I want to tell at least one more quick one. I know we're kind of running long, but working in Hollywood again, up in the booth. I think I might have been running the floor actually, but also running the booth. What they started to do with me at a certain point was they would give me a booth shift, but then expect me to go manage the ushers in between while I wasn't threading projectors, which is fine.
Which was bullshit, though. I mean,
yeah, I guess I didn't like in that booth all the time.
Yeah.
But so I get a call to come to customer service. And there was this guy that I think to this day still works there at customer service that Chris would remember. And he had a really sharp and sarcastic, but kind of lovable personality. Yeah. And so I walk up to him and I lean on the counter. I was like, what's up? And he gestures with his head at a man in a suit standing over by the arcade. He's like, this dude says he lost $10,000. And I was like, what?
What?
He was like, this guy says he had a money clip that had $10,000 in it that must have fallen out of his pocket. But he went back to the movie theater to check. And we even turned the lights on for him and we didn't find it. And he thinks one of the ushers has it. And I'm like, okay. So I've never dealt with anything like this. So I walk over to this guy. I'm not buying any of this, right? Like, who the fuck is putting $10,000 on a money clip to go to the movies? But I tell you what,
nobody.
Once I saw this guy's face, I did not doubt that he had just lost several $1,000s. Like, he just had the look of a man whose soul was crushed. And so now I had just been to this week-long training thing for managers at the home office where one of the things they talked to us about was searching employees' bags if we suspect they've stolen something. And we're not allowed to do it by force. We had to ask permission to search the bag. That was their property. And I was like, let's go talk to the ushers and we'll see. So we walk down. There's 3 ushers on duty. There's one of these guys there he was sort of the rascal of the usher group. He was one of those wise asses who was lazy, but you kind of liked him because he reminded you of yourself when you were younger. And before I even ask a question, I can tell by the look on this guy's face, he's $10,000 richer. And he's sweating. And he's got a backpack. That guy got it in the backpack fast enough. And I asked everybody, did you find the money? And everybody said no. And there's no doubt on my mind, if you're listening to this podcast, dude, you got away with it by a loophole in the rules because I totally knew you had it. And of course, the guy did too. And I turned to him and I explained, look, here's the deal. I can't search their stuff. I'm not allowed by law. If they say they don't have it, then there's nothing else I can do. And that guy was pissed.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I think he was mostly pissed because he was embarrassed that he had been dumb enough to lose that money or even take it.
I mean,
what the hell,
come on,
man?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those, like, I get it. The thing that the wrong thing is someone stole the money. Let's get that out of the way.
Yes.
But you are asking for it.
Oh, yes.
Just, carrying that kind of cash around with you and it in such a way that it can fall down in between the seats of, you should have that at least in a box.
It would be in my
or something.
underwear strapped to my dick. I would not be losing that much cash.
Wrapped around with several rubber bands.
Exactly.
That is correct.
Largest
And some
bills on the
road
outside.
trip condoms. Yeah. Okay, so do we have time for one more, or should we go into
Screw it. They like longer podcasts. Give us another one.
Yeah, let's do one more.
Okay, well, so last podcast I talked about a huge projection win by interlocking Dark Knight with 2 prints, 7 auditoriums. But I've had probably many more failures than well, maybe not like a lot of big, huge failures or whatever, but you remember a lot of your failures more than you remember your good stuff. But the first projection problem, huge problem I ever had, and it wasn't really my fault, but it was, to this day, I think it was the biggest film disaster I've ever seen of a movie that is running in an auditorium. This was back in 1996. I remember a bunch of friends like Jonathan and Mike and all these people that we know, went to see the movie Screamers. And I was at this time, I was, closing the theater and all this other type of stuff. This is my old theater in Franklin. And so all the movies had started and so I'm like sitting there and I'm going to go into Screamers and watch some of the movie with them. So I walked in and I watched some of Screamers. Now, I don't think I've ever had this kind of premonition before or since, but I got up. I was like, I need to I was going to get up anyway. I wasn't going to watch the whole freaking movie or anything, but I got up, I walked out, and as soon as I walked out of that one theater, somebody came out of the theater showing From Dusk Till Dawn and said there's something wrong with the movie. Now, up until this point, I had never run into anything that was huge, like maybe some brain wraps here and there, but those were always easy to fix. Maybe you'd have to cut out some frames or whatever and, move on, you start the movie. I walked up and this brain wrap, and I will explain if anybody needs to know that back in 35 millimeter days before it was digital, you had a movie that looked sort of like a vinyl record, basically, is what it looked like. And in the center, you have a brain which controls sort of the speed of the film as it goes through the projector, and it sort of just makes sure that the film stays intact and it doesn't do anything crazy. Now, if your brain or your platter or anything like that is off time, then sometimes you get some crazy things with the film going through that brain. And what, like if your platter runs too fast, then, film wraps around the brain. And after a while it wraps so much you have projector going one way and you have the film getting pulled another way. And that's what happens with if you ever experience the burned frame on the screen type of thing that, Gremlins 2, probably scared 100 projectionists with. That's what would happen is the brain would wrap, it would pull one way, the projectors pull another way, it burns. So this is what had happened with From Dusk Till Dawn. However, on this particular brain wrap, and I never saw it again. I never saw this same thing again. So, I was talking about the vinyl record thing. So you have a tail end of that movie that's towards the edge of the platter. That tail end, there's many ways to keep that tail, in its spot. You can't tape it you can't tape it because it ends up causing that same problem at the end or whatever. So usually you put like something like a platter puck, which, sort of like, keeps it sort of, keeps it from going anywhere. Or you have, you tuck it underneath the film, or you do a variety of things, that tail end of the movie. And we tucked it. We tucked our tails underneath the film to keep it from doing anything. Well, something had happened with this brain wrap where the tail actually went inside where the brain is.
Oh my God.
And that tail started wrapping around the film that was going into the projector. So you had the, let's say reel 2 of the movie is going through the projector. The very final reel 5 or 6 or whatever, also is going through that projector at the time. I don't think it got that far, but it wrapped around, reel 5 wrapped around reel 2, basically the tail end of it. Jeez. So you had not only just you had a brain wrap, but you also had that nonsense going on. And I also believe that it was not only a fast brain wrap where you had the film go one way, but you also had like a slow brain wrap where the film went another way. So there was like it physically felt like there were 2 different kinds of brain wraps, because it, like a hose, it's like it's hard to get out the kinks and all these other different things. I actually stupidly thought that I could run it from once I got the tail part off of it, I was like, all right, I'm just going to run this after I splice it back or whatever. I press start on it and like, no, there's still a brain wrap, you dumbass. What are you doing? and like it burned again. And finally I just, when you're a projectionist, you're just sitting there, you look at it for like 10, 15 seconds and you're like, all right, I guess I'm going to have to give people refund passes. Yeah. So, I gave 30 people their refund passes, but this film disaster, there was so much to it. Like, all the movies got done while it was happening. Jonathan and Mike and all the people they were with came upstairs with me and helped me with it. And we were like pulling film all the way down the hallway and like just trying to get all these little kinks and I don't know how to really explain it, but there's kinks and there's loops and there's stuff tied together and there's all this other type of stuff. And you're just cutting everywhere you can so that you can get more ends and that you don't have to, sit there and like physically untie a whole bunch of film that's all wrapped together in a spaghetti at this point. And like, just, and it took us I think it was like 2:00 in the morning to get all that. And I probably put like 50 splices in that one reel. So like when it ran through again, it was like, da-doom, 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 and everything. To this day, it was the worst disaster I've ever seen. And when we went to Hollywood 27, there was like a whole new set of problems that came up through brain wraps and things like that would happen. I remember Love Actually had something that was really close to what that From Dusk Till Dawn thing was, but it wasn't nearly the problem. Of course, I was also way more experienced by that time too.
Asshole number 4 projector that for no reason and without warning would sometimes just feed the entirety of the film onto the floor instead of back onto the platter.
Yeah, you had 2 problems with that projector, where it was the platter that was rewinding the film as it was running would stop and it would stop without warning. Like, you if you got it through the first trailer, you usually were okay. But like if you started it and it was like about, 30 seconds and you just walked off, sometimes it would just stop running. So then you had that would happen. And then you have a fail safe that's supposed to tell the projector, hey, the film is loose. It's no longer tight. Shut off. And what this would do is it would just continue. It was like too good of a sensor. Like it was reading it like as film was still in there. It didn't matter. So the film that's supposed to be rewinding suddenly is just going onto the floor. And like you wouldn't know anything about it until the film, there would be a pile of film on the floor and it would, waist high. And it would finally run into a spot where the movie couldn't spill any more film out onto the floor, and it would finally go, oh fuck, and then it would it would shut off. Hollywood 27 was just filled with that type of stuff though. Like they had static issues and platter speed problems that you couldn't really fix ever, it seemed like. And every technician, until like the really good one came in, every technician that would come in would try to solve this problem one way or the other, or they would just ignore it or whatever. And man, there's so many like film disasters where the entire movie would fall on the floor while the movie was running and everything. You had all that type of stuff. Nothing as bad as that From Dusk Till Dawn though. Wow. Like those, I mean, Epic. It really took forever. I don't know how interesting that story is, but it's sort of back in the day. of what you had to deal with film. And if you didn't know every single like last thing about platter speeds and brains and all this other type of stuff, then sometimes something like that would happen.
It must have been epic because the people that helped you with that still talk about that story up to this day. So apparently very memorable.
I used to get bitched out by those technicians you're talking about when I was a booth manager because I would retime the platters because I was smart enough to know how to do it and I could tell when one was off. And then they would come and go, "Who did this? Who tweaked this?" And I said, "I did," so I could run a show. But I would still get in trouble. But anyway, what are you going to do?
Yeah, that's a whole other story of that. Those people, a lot of times, I definitely got into it with a couple of technicians.
Oh, yeah. Well, I also have a film disaster story for next time, too. So
okay,
we'll
great.
see how well they like yours, and if they hated it, I won't tell mine.
That's a teaser,
I mean,
kids.
I think the problem in general with a story like that, it's hard to visualize if you've never seen a projector run before. Like, I can't even really describe it to you without there being some things that I know for a fact that you really don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah. But like, I think everybody has been in a theater before everything was digital and has experienced that burn on the screen thing. I think everybody's got a story like that. And in almost every instance, it is something like that happened. All right. So are we ready for our Q&A?
It's going to be short this week, but I'm ready.
Question. I got something to say. I want the truth.
I am listening.
So we had a couple of great questions come in through SoundCloud. And one of the ones that we were looking at is a question saying, has there ever been a movie that you walked out on or turned off that you later ended up enjoying? Now, we've talked about the times where we've walked out of movies and that kind of thing. But this is an interesting question to see like what we ended up like just kind of turning around on and saying like, oh, okay, I kind of dug that. And I'll go on and just throw out mine because I didn't get the context of where it was coming from. Was Paul Verhoeven's Starship Troopers?
God damn it! That's the movie I was going to come up with.
Well, it's probably for similar reasons. Maybe not. I just didn't get the subtext. I didn't get the whole propaganda thing. I was going in to watch a straight up action, like sci-fi movie, and I ended up liking it, with that kind of mentality around it, especially having read the book and everything. But I will still defend my dislike of Casper Van Dien's performance. I think
he's terrible.
Regardless of how parody it's supposed to be, that was fucking ridiculous.
Yeah. I'll tell you how low of an opinion I had of Starship Troopers before it even came out. The movie that opened against Starship Troopers was Mad City. Dustin Hoffman, John Travolta.
I remember that.
And back in the day, I used to have a lot of friends come out on a Thursday night to come watch a movie, and this is totally against policy of any movie theater to have like that, especially that many people. A lot of times it was a huge amount of people that would come and watch on a Thursday night. When I worked at a theater that just was so out of the middle of nowhere that nobody ever checked on, that you kind of get away with that type of stuff. But I remember the way we did things is sometimes I would purposely not build a movie or whatever because we didn't open during the day. So I knew I had all of Friday or all of Thursday to build the next movie or whatever. And I was like, I hate Starship Troopers so much. I'm gonna build Mad City. And actually, I think I was sort of rebelling against all the people who would come out on these Thursdays. With people who not even your friend or whatever would come out and like, hey, I heard about these movies. And like, who'd you hear it from? Oh yeah, this guy said it'd be okay to come along. Oh, he did. Okay. And but. So like Starship Troopers, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to build Mad City. But normally a big movie like Starship Troopers, I'd be like excited to just watch it no matter what. But in defiance, I simply just built Mad City and just said, we're going to watch Mad City tonight.
Fuck you. Here's Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah. Fuck you, Starship Troopers. And, but then I watched Starship Troopers and I was 20 when that movie came out, and I don't think I had fully developed my sense of like satire and everything.
Yeah.
And Verhoeven very much does that with RoboCop and to some weird extent Showgirls, even though it's still not good. But Starship Troopers, I wasn't really watching it with the satire in mind, even though there were a lot of RoboCop-esque things in that movie.
Yeah.
Especially with the the come join the army footage reels and all that would, that they were playing and everything. Yeah, would you like to learn more? And all that. And but then I watched it again at a midnight movie here at the Belcourt. And I had already sort of heard a lot of, I'd heard this about Starship Troopers, like, oh, I need to see that again. I never gave it another chance. And I watched it at the Belcourt and I'm like, oh yeah, I actually really like this movie now, so it took a good long while, but I eventually came around on it.
And I don't think it was just you and me. I think quite a bit of its initial audience had no clue what they were watching.
No, it wasn't presented as something that
it was
fun.
marketed. Yeah, it was marketed as just a standard like action sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, mine is probably a little bit obscure, but it's Kids in the Hall Brain Candy.
Oh, that's a good one.
And I was such a Kids in the Hall fan of their sketch show, and my buddy Josh and I went to see this movie when it came out. We had to drive, just like Mystery Science Theater 3K, the movie, we had to drive pretty far because it was a limited release. But and I attribute my not liking it the first time to just pure shock. Like I just wasn't expecting so much of what I saw. Just like South Park, the movie, they had gone so much harder and bluer than they were able to do on their show. I wasn't used to seeing contained, like a big long story. I was used to seeing these little vignettes. And I just kind of walked out going, okay, so that was a thing. And then when it came out on video, like 6 months later, we rented it. Josh and I used to do this a lot, where we would rent something to make sure we were right the first time we saw it. Like, we did it with Cable Guy because we loved it, but everybody else hated it. So when it came out, we rented it. Let's make sure we were right. Yeah, we still love it. Second time, Kids in the Hall Brain Candy, laughed my ass off. I was crying and giggling.
Oh, yeah.
Once I had sort of cleaned the slate of what to expect, I was able to accept the comedy in a much better way.
Yeah, the Scott Thompson stuff in that movie is so funny. I would recommend just going out and watching it today for that reason. Everything Scott Thompson related in that movie is hilarious.
Yeah,
it just hits you from every different direction, completely unexpectedly, much like that South Park movie. It's just like,
yeah. Well, like they're not afraid to not only do uncomfortable humor. I think they like it sometimes, like the whole cancer boy thing, where you're just like you're laughing, but you know it's wrong and it's sad. And how have you manipulated me thusly?
That is a really good one because I think I was sort of the same way when I first watched it. Although I think I didn't watch it in theaters. I watched it much later on. And I was at first, I think more, I just didn't want to watch it because there were a lot of bad reviews for it when it first came out.
When did it come out? 94?
Somewhere around there. I think it was 95, 96. Cause I think I was officially working we didn't get that movie. The theater across the street got it. I think I was officially like an assistant manager and all that around the time. I think it was 95, 96, somewhere when it came out. But yeah, mid 90s. It's such a good one because that's something that, when you first watch it, it's just, this is too much. This is too much. Can't deal with it. Anyway, that is the podcast, the SinCast for this week. We continue to monitor SoundCloud for our comments and stuff like that. If you want to tweet Cinemasins too, we can do that. But just tell us how we're doing. Tell us if we're doing well. If you got any suggestions, whatever, we're monitoring those. Anything else we need to add today, guys?
We're monitoring you.
Yes, we're monitoring you. Like much like the year that we were doing today, 1984, we are big brothering everything.
Oh, nice callback.
Yeah. Oh,
we didn't even mention that movie, which I think there's a version of that came out that year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it did. It has John Hurt in it. I've never seen it, but I've heard it's a really good adaptation.
Any creepy dictatorial movie has to have John Hurt in it, right?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So that is the SinCast. We will, this is Chris Atkins and Jeremy Scott and Barrett Sheriff signing off. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. Comment on our episodes on our SoundCloud page. Check us out on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit. And be sure to visit Cinemasins.com.